Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. Colleagues, this is a very sad day in this chamber. I'm truly stunned and saddened with the overwhelming grief for what we are doing here, the Monday after Mother's Day. Because we have mothers all over the state who love their kids more than anything else in the world, and they are hugging their terrorized kids today as this body rips away their right to provide health care for their children. By taking this vote today, we are forcing lifelong Texans to flee the state in order to save their children from you. What has Texas become? Not one that protects children, but rather a battlefield. One that stands idly by while our kids continue to be harmed by the very laws this body chooses to pass or those it chooses to ignore. We stand by and do nothing. A state where no child is safe. But stop fooling yourselves. This body does not pass laws to protect children. Why? Because politics continues to outweigh the lives we swore to represent and protect. But make no mistake, SB14 will harm children. Whether some of you choose to ignore that now or ignore that later. In fact, it already has. We heard in testimony during committee from a sibling of a trans child who has already attempted suicide because their care was shut down after a previous executive order. And we know that several other children have taken their lives already because their care was cut off by the chilling effect previous actions by state leaders. All of it is couched in vain politics to protect the very little Texans claim to be considered when taking the dangerous and uncompassionate vote that many of you will take today. This is wrong. When did we as a state abandon our moral duty to protect every child? When did politics rise above truth, our duty, our responsibility, and honor? When did Texas decide it would leave a trail of dead children's bodies all over the state? A state where a parent who did not choose to love their child for who they were when they came out and left them to fend for themselves in foster care, where we know they will further be harmed or at worst die. Members, that's child abuse. Children whose parents choose to abandon them because of who they are the ones who need real protection. Yet the families who are targeted by this bill are some of the strongest, loving, and accepting individuals I've ever met in my life. Families that would do anything for each other. That's what a parent's love looks like. But to these families, a parent's love also includes showing up at the Capitol, session after session, and sacrificing everything to make sure their child has the best future they can possibly have, more than most parents have to endure. Members, I know many of you in this chamber are parents. I know you love your children because you bring them to their Capitol. I hear you talking about them on the House floor, and I know that you would do anything to protect them, to make sure they're safe, to make sure they're happy, and that they have access to the health care that they need to survive. It should be no different for the parents of transgender children. These parents deserve the right to fight for their children, to take them to their doctor if they are concerned about gender dysphoria, and get access to the appropriate treatment as determined by their doctor, their family, and their child. We have spent the entire session falsely claiming we want to protect these so-called parental rights. And what this bill will do is take away their right to make decisions that are best for their child. Why is this so-called right only available for some parents but not all? If we want to protect parental rights, we must protect every parent's parental rights, not just those that fall within a certain ideology. Members, I know many of you on the other side of the aisle, whether you will admit it or not, do not want to take this vote today. In fact, many of you have shared with me and others that passing this bill is dangerous and, plainly put, just bad policy. This bill targets a certain Texas families and seeks to destroy their lives by taking away their right to access life-saving health care. As a lifelong Texan, I'm ashamed at the path our great state has taken. And despite the so-called science the author of this bill references to justify this legislation, an American report from top experts at Yale University and the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center concluded that, quote, the scientific errors and omissions are so extensive that the conclusion is clear. These laws are motivated by bias and crafted to achieve a preordained goal to deny gender-affirming care to transgender youth. Officials in Texas have exaggerated potential harms of gender-affirming care and intentionally painted a warped picture of the scientific evidence that is available. A team of 7 medical and legal experts at Yale University and the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center wrote in a recent report. Efforts to ban gender-affirming care in Texas rely heavily on poor quality evidence, the report goes on. Scientists need to have a seat at the table, and perhaps most importantly, there must be a penalty for writing fake science into law. The report also continues to say that trans and non-binary youth are facing the fight of their lives to simply exist, and we can't let them stand alone. This is a matter of life and death, the report continued. To that point, one of the author's witnesses, whom he relies on to justify this bill, was from the American College of Pediatrics, a fringe doctors group with only about 600 members. Compared to reputable medical associations like the American Academy of Pediatrics, which has over 67,000 pediatricians, along with 20 other major medical associations who oppose this legislation. This fringe group is anti-LGBT. It relies on junk science that is not vetted or published in any legitimate medical journal and has been identified as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. It's also worth noting that this so-called witness's expertise has previously been discredited by a Texas court. The whole existence of this group is to spread misinformation about gay and trans people. And how do we know this? A data breach from their doctors' group that included more than 10,000 emails and documents that were left in an open file online titled, "How to Defund Trans Pediatrics." It clearly spells out the animus of this group and the real reason that we have an outright national assault on trans children. In fact, these emails even admitted that they shopped around the same witnesses from state to state. Why? Because they don't have real Texans to testify. So they flew most of their witnesses in from out of state to testify in a public hearing in Texas about things that never happened in Texas. When this bill was heard in committee, only 84 people registered in support, while 2,401 Texans registered in opposition. Most people on the invited list to testify in support were from out of state. They did not receive health care in Texas. They were adult when they made their decisions and had absolutely nothing to do with Texas doctors, Texas parents, or Texas children. While over 500 Texans registered in opposition never got the opportunity to testify because they were sent home when testimony was cut off at midnight. We're refusing to hear the stories from real Texans on how this bill will impact their lives is not what a democracy looks like. I'm disappointed and sad that so many parents I know who have trans kids who are happy and healthy and now scared to death of our state. That's not my Texas. And members, as I close, I want to urge you from the bottom of my heart to vote against SB14. We need to show that discrimination has no place in our state, that Texas is a place where everyone can thrive with dignity and their humanity respected, regardless of their gender identity. I know many of you have sat down with families that will be negatively impacted by this bill, and they have opened up to you, shared their sensitive stories, and introduced you to their sweet children, many of whom missed school to come to Austin to testify. I want to close by reading a letter I received from a constituent of mine the last time this bill came to the floor. He sent it to me at 11:26 p.m. And instead of being asleep, getting rest to take his AP exam the next day, he was awake thinking about what his fate will be here in Texas. Hi, Jessica. I'm a 17-year-old trans kid. I had the privilege of starting testosterone this past December, and I've never felt more confident in my body and self. The process of coming out and gaining support from my family has been difficult and taken time. There was a point when I did not see myself living to this point of my life. Seeing these changes happening in those around me who grew up to accept and support me, this has been the happiest point in my life. I've been looking at colleges and started a new job. However, whenever I look at the news and recent bills, all that hope is drained. I'm terrified for the future of me and other trans youth living in Texas. I have only 1 year until I will be safe from this bill, but so many others aren't so lucky. It's incredibly disheartening to see children's livelihoods turned into a political stance. Children are taking their own lives, yet they cannot see past what they choose to. I have been taking AP Government this year, but I still don't know how many ways I can help or if I can at all. I'm not sure if this message will reach you or change the circumstances, but I just needed an outlet. I need to feel that I have done something, even if it's meaningless. Please advocate for trans kids who have to fight every day just to be respected. Being trans is not a choice. If it was, and I and many others would have stopped a long time ago. Dysphoria can be crippling, and shutting off these resources is a death sentence for so many. I'm scared and I don't know what the future looks like. Maybe things will keep getting worse for us. I don't understand why my identity and struggles are so infuriating to some. All we want to do is live. Hormones increase the quality of life for so many. They should not be perceived in such a negative light. They saved my life and will be able to save so many more if this bill is not passed. Members, I want you to remember these stories and these faces of these families and these folks who will be affected by this bill, and I encourage you to vote no. Thank you.